Okay, welcome everybody back to another episode with our co-host. I'm starting it with the word co-host now, Jane. I think that's probably the best way to do it now on a Monday recording. Thank
Feel the
you.
pressure now.
Yeah, that's it. You can just take the reins and, do whatever you want. However, today we are going to be talking about leaving teaching and the mental pressures around that because I think we all have different stories and different takes on how we've left. Like I know, like between yourself and me, we've spoken in the past about how certain things aligned, but our reasons for leaving actually start off at a different point. So I thought I'd share a little bit of the story of how I left, and then you can do the same, and we'll talk about how we ended up sort of aligning up with the same on the same path. Well, I didn't want to leave teaching is probably the best way to start. I loved it. And I was in a really, what I'm going to call a safe school, one of those schools which really look after you and nobody left. But the trouble with that is that if you're an ambitious person or you know you've got more to give, you can get stuck. And that's kind of what happened. I was there for about 7 years and I'd moved sideways a couple of times, but there was no room to get into SLT, no room to get into leadership. So, and it was kind of natural. It's getting to that point. I was getting quite itchy. And in fact, I would say that I'd never really been in a job longer than 3 years. 3 years was always like the window. I was like, do you know what? I haven't moved on. Now I need to go and find something different. But because it did feel so safe, I stayed there for 7 years and I did love it. I still do love it. I love going back there. It feels like I'm walking back into home when I go there. And I don't go there that often. So I left and I got an assistant head job. And that's kind of a really long story short, but basically got an assistant head job, head of Key Stage 1. And I was like really excited about leading people. I was really excited about, I don't know, I suppose like making sure that we were making positive changes in real early years learning. But it became apparent rather quickly that that really wasn't what the job was about. And so when I went there for my interview and I spent a day there, it was very positive, but people were putting little warnings, which I didn't realize until later. There was a couple of people saying that what you're seeing today is not what it's going to be like in September. They were going through redundancies. They were losing people, they were losing staff. And so there was a little bit of ill feeling, but nothing that was that I hadn't experienced before. Like when I went out of local authority when I worked for for the council where people went out on redundancy. So you kind of get the fact that it's going to be a little bit painful. But I didn't really, I suppose I didn't have the foresight to look at what September was actually going to look like because I'd never experienced it before. What it looked like was a vastly under-resourced place, but they were trying to work innovatively because they were in special measures. And so
Okay.
what they'd done in reception, they trialed this thing, or basically continuous provision. Now, reception and in the early years provision, continuous provision should really be a thing. I'm a big believer in that. And continuous provision is where you set up a particular part of the room that focuses on a skill. So in reception, because or early years foundation stage, in the foundation stage, there's certain things that you need them to complete, children to complete their milestones, and you capture it with photos. Not everything has to be like recorded like we would in, say, year 1 and year 2. But the people that they got in, like for consultation, I won't name them because I think that'd be unfair. Like the company name, I mean, they were, I'm going to say aggressive is probably the best way to describe them. They called it passionate. I say they were well over the top, just bossing people about, not letting people like come back at them with a like, can we just have a reality check here? So I'm just going to paint the picture. We were a full school, but it was 1.5 form entry, and we had a year 1 class. I was teaching a split year 1, 2, and then we had a year 2 class. Now I was in the middle, so I was the middle classroom. Our consultation friends said we need to do continuous provision in year 1 and year 2. Now I'm not skeptical of the benefits of continuous provision. I think it's amazing. What I don't think it doesn't help the situation when we were still looking at sitting year 2 SATs, those the end of Key Stage 1 tests. because there was no way to prep them. So I had a classroom with no tables. I had a classroom with basically toys everywhere. Now, that is really downplaying this stuff because they invested heavily. It was all lovely wooden. Um, I don't they called them something. I can't remember the name, but there was wooden blocks, there was wooden dolls. We had like a science corner. If every single key stage one teacher right now will be going, oh my God, you had the perfect classroom. And I did on the basis of it, on the face of it, I really did. But what I didn't have was any adults to really man anything. And with continuous provision, we have this thing called free flow.
Mm.
So in English, for example, the only time we didn't have free flow was for phonics and we had groups, but the rest was free flow. So let's do English in the morning. So the year two class could free flow into my year two class, and the year
Right.
one could free flow into mine, and my year twos could go to year two, and my year ones could
Yeah.
go to. But what actually happened was people wanted to come into my classroom. So I ended up with, on most mornings, 50 children in my room, and I was on my own. We have a shared TA between year one, my classroom, and the year two classroom. And I would be like, and obviously this is still new to me. Like
Yeah.
I'm not experienced. So I come at this with a very like green and naive way.
Mm.
So there's no way I have the experience to kind of cope with 50 in a room and do
Mhm.
continuous provision. And I don't understand how this works. And the CEO of the academy was walking around. It's probably my third week, and he came in. He went, "What's going on?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't know what's going on." I've got my little group I'm trying to do some maths with, and I've got 40 other children in my classroom, all like, for want of a better word, mucking about. They're in the science corner with the science
Oh.
coats on, but not really doing science. I've got people in the writing corner, but
Mhm.
not really doing writing. And so we got the consultation people back in, and they came to work with us for a whole day. And they were really I mean, this is how the day started. It was like, right, okay, this usually costs £2,000, but we've come down on the because we want to sort everybody out, and we realize it's not going very well, which put my back up really, because in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm not I already understand what we're trying to do. I'd already done their 3 day training, and I really get it. But the one thing that they didn't see was that when you're trying to do it on your own
Mm.
with 6 year olds, well, 5 year olds and 6 year olds, that they need some support to make it
Yeah.
work. They do need that training. I really get that. But how do I train everybody all the time and still thinking about my year twos? Because this is the thing, I'm like,
Yeah.
I've got to get these year twos ready for this test. And they were really strong, year twos. There was
Yeah.
no reason why we wouldn't have met like the national rate. Anyway, all that to one side. They came in and just kept saying the same things over and over again. And in the end, I think I got to lunchtime and I think I just had enough. And I was like, right, I need to stop you there. And I got quite like, you've been very aggressive. She went, no, no, it's just passion. I was like, no, you're being very aggressive because you're not listening. Well, I don't need to listen because, and there's all this stuff thinking, oh my gosh. And I was like, well, and I said, well, can you just please walk with me? Just come and walk with me and I'll show you.
Mm.
We went around the stations, and I was showing her like how I tried to do the maths and
Mhm.
English and writing, and how the outside area should be used, but we can't really use it because we don't have the adults. And I was going, look, if I have 50 children here and I'm on my own, and I need to work with this little group of maths, but I also got to do the behavior management across the room, make sure people are on track. How
Mhm.
do I do that
Yeah.
and teach these? It's taking me a whole week to do one maths lesson.
Yeah.
And I should be in that week be doing 5 maths lessons, but I'm doing one. Right.
Mhm.
That was that. And she was like, okay, I can see, yes, we need someone else out here. There wasn't anybody. And so we ended the day the same way we started it, with needing still having to do it. We wasn't allowed to not do it, but no further forward. And I was like, well, what I did, and I came out with loads more questions. So I went to see the head of school and just said, look, I think you've employed the wrong person, because I can't do my job with this setup. It just doesn't work. I cannot only teach 38 maths lessons a year and expect my year twos to make it. It just doesn't make any sense. So I was very early on in that new job. I'd kind of highlighted the fact that I think they got the wrong person, right? Because I didn't have that experience. I wasn't going to buy into it because I didn't
Yeah.
think it was right. And I'm going to cut again, another really long story short, go forward another month. I went to see them again and said, I'm still struggling, I'm drowning. And I'd already dragged out some of that furniture, by the way. I dragged out about £45,000 worth of stuff and replaced it with tables. Went
Oh,
to see the head teacher and said, look, I've just dragged out £45,000 worth of stuff that could have funded two TAs for the year.
yeah.
I think we would have been better with having TAs. I'm getting them down on tables because these year twos can definitely make the progress they need, but they are doing nothing with me at the moment. They're just mucking about all day. And so they looked at me and I was like, they kind of let it slide. Which I don't know whether that was the right thing or not, because I took advantage of it. And eventually all of that equipment left the room. I did have some space and for the year ones, because the year ones do need to have
Yeah.
more continuous provision, but the year twos were sat and they were learning. By the time we get to kind of Christmas, just before Christmas, I'd gone to see them one more time and just said, I'm drowning. I'm doing sort of 14, 15 hours a day. This isn't what I signed up for. And I get being in a school with special measures is hard work, but we wasn't making a difference. And I think that was the thing for me. I wasn't making it
Yeah.
more. And that was big. And I didn't want to go back. We broke up for Christmas, and then I met up with some friends, and it was either the 2nd or 3rd of January. And we were just sat in one of my best friend's house, and we sat around a table just mucking about, having a bit of a chinwag and just taking the mickey out of one another, probably. And I was like, it was getting late. I was about to go home, and I knew I had to go into school the next day. And I was like, just sat back and I was like, I don't want to go back. And it was like this weird feeling of, I actually really don't want to get up in the morning and drive to school, set foot in the place. I just really don't. And so I shared that with everybody, and we had a quick chat before going home. And I think someone gave me a lift, and I just made a decision that I'm not going. I'm not going to go.
Wow.
What I did do was I went in and said, I want to leave. And they stripped me straight away of my assistant head thing. I was like, look, let's take the leadership away from you. I wasn't doing the leadership, by the way, anyway, so it didn't make any difference. They'd already had a leader who had kind of designed all this stuff at Key Stage One. So when I went in with like ideas, it was like, oh, we've already doing this thing. And I was like, well, I'm not a leader, Lynn. I don't really understand what I'm
Yeah.
doing. That was kind of something else to go into the recipe. And yeah, and they was like, okay. And then the CEO came later on that afternoon, was like, okay, we want you gone by the end of the week.
I was so shocked when you told me that. Like, it's absolutely outrageous.
It's interesting because I think, and this is what we all need to be careful of, because when you're that vulnerable,
Yeah.
really easy just to go, oh, thank God they want me gone. Because I was like, part of me was like, I want to say yes,
Yeah.
because I really don't want
Yeah.
to come back. Um, but I can remember I'd either sent an email to the union or I'd had a phone call, I can't remember now.
Right.
And they were amazing because they said, look, we don't need to get involved, but
Hmm.
we'll just give you some advice. Or we don't need to get involved yet, is what they said.
Right.
So they gave me some advice. And in that meeting, they was like, don't agree to anything.
Mm.
Just sit and listen. And I can't remember there was something I had to watch out for. It was basically this whole like just getting rid of you, just don't agree to it. There will be some way of securing that of something. And even though I'd only been there a little while, I could have gone off sick.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could have
Yeah.
gone
Yeah.
off sick. I did say, well, I'll just go off sick then. I'm not going to go Friday. And I went, no, 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 stay with us till Friday because we can make sure we give you a send off. They were trying to be quite kind about it. And I just said no. And I had another conversation with the union rep
Hmm.
either that day or the day after, who gave me some more advice and just again really vulnerable because I was really low.
Yeah.
Like you can imagine, like the mental health at this point, particularly because I knew now they didn't want me, which is a big
Yeah.
like, kick in the teeth. Yeah, just told me to hang on in there and then talk severance. Which I got to be honest, like on doing that on my own now, looking back, I'm not sure how I did that.
Right.
I'm not sure where that came from, other than their questions ringing through my mind, because I did just want to run away.
Mm.
And I kept
Because you're
saying,
so alone, aren't you? Like,
oh,
it's you, and obviously, I would imagine that there will be a whole panel of people that you're talking to on
even,
the other side of the desk, and then it's just you.
yeah. And also talks in between, because I
Yeah.
think that was the other bit. Like you. You go, oh, they want me out on Friday, and then I have to go down and teach phonics. And like to sort of pick yourself up in the room. And I mean, I think I'm quite good at that because I do really love it. So being in the classroom is a very safe space, right? Because it
Yeah.
feels like you shut the door off and it becomes your environment. So in a way, that was probably quite like a bit of a safety element. But then in between, like if it was lunchtime, someone would come and see you and go, right, have you given it any thought? What are we going to do next week? Sort of push. Oh, and then there was like an offer on the table, but you got to make your decision by 3 o'clock. Those kind of things.
Which
Um,
is probably not the way to do things.
well, no, it's
Or,
not. Particularly, they're trying to take the union off the table, which is
hmm
exactly what they said. Don't contact the union. That is exactly what they said. And I didn't tell them. Well, it's too late. I'd already done it. But basically, there was some strength there, and that's what I reflect back on now. There was something
Yeah.
that was deep inside that meant I could. I don't think I'd say I sat up straight and I was confident because I wasn't.
Yeah.
But there was something in there that was like, no, they're not going to do this to me because again, the bigger purpose is my family. Like,
Yeah.
and I did say at one point because I think it was the Friday thing, and he gave me an offer like I have to accept it by a certain point, and I was like, look, I know I already know I'm going to say no
Yeah.
because it doesn't give me enough time to say to find a job, and I've got bills to pay.
Yeah.
And his response was, well, that's not my problem. And I was like, but the response I had a response. I was like, I know it's mine, and I'm dealing with it
Yeah.
by saying no to you. And so we had this like standoff. And then we left it. And there was a little bit of time because I know I taught for another week on top. So I was back for 2 weeks. And you can just imagine it was so unpleasant. Like so unpleasant just to be in that environment. And then I think there was another offer put to the table. I spoke to the union and they said, well, if they extend it to a certain point, which was Easter, this is probably the best you'll get in this
Right.
circumstance. And that's exactly what they did. I've got to say, in the end, the offer was quite fair
Mm.
with that in mind. And they said, if you get a job at any point, our support will stop. But
Right.
it's there until Easter, regardless.
Mhm.
And then I know I've spoken about this before, but I literally just stayed in bed for probably about 4 weeks. I didn't really get up and do much. It was quite, I don't know, there was a lot of unraveling and a lot of letting go of stuff until this is where the tuition came from. I was like, sort of, I don't know, I don't know what, and I cannot remember what, but something's changed, and I kind of like snapped out of it and was like, right, got to do something. Can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
Wonder if tuition will be the thing.
So did you go from that straight into tuition? Well, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. But by the yeah, basically. So I
Yeah.
was like, right, what would this need to look like? What do I need
Right.
to do? Look, I often say this is nuanced with the fact that I've got a business degree. My interest is business. I've always read business books.
Right.
Geeky that way. So I was like, there was information there,
Right.
never applied it. So what if I just take a chance? What if something happens? What if what I think could happen does actually happen? What you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
imagine. I started up a Facebook page, and then by the end of that week, I had a few clients. It just
Wow.
happened, and I thought, crikey, this is really easy.
Yeah. But for your self-esteem as well, though, knowing that people want you and people are going to choose you, I imagine that was quite a big thing.
I think by the end of the first couple of weeks, I was tutoring 4 people on a Sunday. I was just driving
Yeah.
around. I was still applying for jobs because it wasn't
Right.
enough. And at the time, it was about because I had the money coming in from the school as the
Mhm.
gardening leave, I think they called it. And then it was really about actually if I could find a teaching job at this point, it was about giving myself something to do
Yeah.
and something positive, and the idea of doing something for me, which
Mhm.
was quite big. But the money coming in on the Sunday was about paying off credit card debt. I had
Yeah.
this credit card debt that I really wanted to get rid of, and I was earning okay money teaching, but we all know it's pretty much
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in most cases. And it was a serviceable debt. Like I listened to other people's stories about debt, and I'm like, it really wasn't that bad. It's
Yeah.
just something that bothered me. And that's what it did. It paid off my debt like quite quickly. I did find another job that really helped me realize that actually being in a school was okay.
Okay.
Really supportive. They tried a lot to keep me there, but I'd already made up my mind. I was taught there for about 7 months. And then, no, actually probably wasn't as long as that. It's probably more like 4 or 5. but it was really supportive, but it was a journey. And it was one of those, it was like a 50-minute drive there, 50-minute drive back.
Oh.
One of those where, like when you drive, I use a lot of breathing techniques, and I
Mm.
used to drive when I got to about 20 minutes away, there was like a bridge that took you onto the island. So if you're in the southeast, you'll know this place. It's called the Isle of Sheppey. It's quite renowned as being quite a deprived area. It was an amazing place to go and teach. The children were super challenging, but they were incredible, incredible people. And I did absolutely love every second. But I used to get like these mini panic attacks on the way. And I think from the trauma of what had happened in the past, so I used to like think, oh, right, okay, now breathe. And I used to do these big, long breathing things on the way down. And I
My
used to settle me
goodness.
down. But it was quite hard. And this is when we were saying about what should we talk about, I think that, look, the experiences that we have of leaving, and mine will seem quite traumatic.
Mm.
And I know lots of people have similar experiences of being bullied out, and over a longer period of time than what I was, really entrenched stuff. Mine was over quite quickly because I was like, I didn't want to be there anymore. And I probably would have just taken a risk on myself. And even though I went to job interviews and didn't get jobs, that actually turned out for the best eventually. But we are left with these feelings that sit, and they can manifest in different ways. So for me, driving in, I'd have like these, I'm going to call them really mild panic attacks, because it was like I could feel my breathing
Mm.
change, because I knew like I'd have to go and put a performance on in school.
Yeah.
Although it was quite safe
Yes.
in the classroom, there's still elements of the job which you didn't like, in a normal sense. So yeah, so for me, breathing exercises worked in that part, but I ended up having talking therapy to help me get through it. But I think also like the other side to it is, and I know people go, oh, it's not talking about it again, but that surrounding yourself with just positive people. I'm very lucky that in my immediate kind of circle of friends and family, we have some very sensible heads that
Mm.
will still go, yeah, of course, take a risk, but ask the right questions and do all the things. I think similar to our relationship, and Jane, you have to have those people.
Yeah.
Because one, it helps you with the bravery of, say, standing up and doing the right thing, even if it means it's a risk. But also, it's the fallout of what you're left with. And
Mm.
being able just to I think I just kind of stewed in my own self-pity for about 4 weeks. But that was part of that healing and sleep. I mean, I don't think I've ever slept that much, ever. Just sleeping is
Mm.
doing pretty much nothing. Um, and the following 6 months were tough. And it's not a quick process. You build yourself back up over time, and that development of self-confidence is not an easy thing, because if someone's told you you're rubbish and you're not needed, you have to unwind that somehow, because
Yeah.
that's not. I still feel that now. It still makes me quite emotional, but I knew deep down it wasn't true. I knew deep down it wasn't true. So look, that's kind of part of my story. The healing is probably something we'll get onto next, but
Mhm.
I know my experience is quite I would even say at the extreme end, but it's at the traumatic part. I know other people have like way, way more traumatic stories than me. But your
But
story,
it's all relative though, and I think that's what we're really good at as teachers, being like, oh, there's somebody worse off than me. But actually that's your experience. That is your experience that you have to work through. And just because it may be worse for somebody else, it doesn't mean that it wasn't really painful for you. I think
you're
that's quite, it's good to acknowledge that.
yeah, that's definitely true. That is definitely true. Like the way, and it's our perception of what's happening
Mm.
at the time, and then I think it's how it leaves. I don't know, the emotion it leaves behind, I think. And then there are other things in there I could talk about, but I think that we get the gist of what that's about. Now, I know that your move away from school wasn't like that. So tell us a little bit about your move away from school.
I feel a bit bad now.
See, yeah, no,
Yeah, it was brilliant. Just
I,
skipped out and never went back.
I've like sucked the life out of everyone. This brings the life back to me. And I'm okay now, by the way. Although I still get emotional about it, I'm actually okay with it.
But yeah, gosh, thank you so much for sharing that with us, though, because it's a real privilege. It just shows what a safe place you've created, though, that you feel like you can open up, because that is, a really brutal story. I don't, when you shared that with me, I was just, my mouth was just open like the whole time. So yeah. Thank you so much for creating that the community though, off the back of that. It's been, really inspiring. Um my my story then. Well, I think I went through this in my really long podcast, didn't I? But in a nutshell, I got pregnant and then just didn't go back. But I think when you said this is what you wanted to talk about, I was like, actually, that's the simplified version, isn't it? But I loved it. I was at the real pinnacle of my career. I worked in a tough school. I had my background was in special measures schools, and then I moved to an rapidly improving secondary school. It was very, very large, but you know, I think I always had in the back of my mind, I did very well there. Um, but there was always an element of you always had to have a bit of an exit plan. It was had quite a high staff turnover. There were a multitude of opportunities for people. I was, really fortunate in that I was a very good fit for that school. I'm also very aware that other people weren't. So in that sense, it was quite similar. And that breeds with it an air of paranoia, doesn't it? And I was always very conscious that I probably did need to have an exit plan at some point. And I think there was an element of when I did become an assistant head teacher, I felt like that was maybe as close to the sun as I wanted to fly, if you like. I feel like there was a real need for me to leave. And in that sense, my pregnancy provided the opportunity for me to do that in a really fluid and non kind of a way that didn't cause any conflict. But look, I was delivering a conference workshop for the SSAT, a national workshop when I was 7 months pregnant. I was delivering preparing for an Ofsted when I was 8 months pregnant. I loved it. Like I absolutely loved it. But I did feel like it was time, the time was right for me to leave for those kind of reasons. And also that, you know, I think when you are on the other side of the table, if you like, I don't know if you found this as an assistant head, like you become aware of maybe things that are less kind of obvious when you are a main scale teacher. So for example, when I was kind of leading my department or, running the teaching and learning team, I knew from a really practical point of view that it is very difficult to make part-time timetables work.
Mm.
From a purely logistical point of view, if you take all emotion out of it, and yes, there are schools that can do that very well, but sometimes it is close to impossible to make it work from a purely timetabling perspective or a staffing perspective. And I think I had that in my head as well, that actually there were times when we had to turn down requests for part-time working because it wasn't possible, and it wasn't anything particularly vindictive or personal. It just didn't work. It didn't work for the students because they had inconsistent teaching, all the rest of it, and just from a purely staffing point of view, it sometimes just couldn't work. So I think because I'm the kind of person that is all in, like if I am doing something, I am absolutely doing it. That kind of, when I did have my son, it caused such a conflict because I knew that I wouldn't be able to do the job that I loved in a way that I wanted to, and that may potentially open me up to, a more unpleasant experience. Um, I also knew that I wouldn't be the mum that I wanted to be, and I just knew that part-time would not work for me personally because I just feel like I was doing a bad job at everything. And that's really why I stepped away. Um, I did leave on a real high. The school got an outstanding Ofsted result like a month after I left, and our kind of team was named like explicitly in the report. It was, I've got some fab quotes for my CV. It was amazing, but it just didn't fit. And I think we spoke at the conference that it's just such a common story now that it is such a shame that so many females are leaving the classroom because it isn't particularly family friendly. And I left teaching. I suppose I was trying to unpick this actually when you said you wanted to talk about this. I don't think when I walked out of that school, when I went on maternity leave, in my head, I hadn't left teaching, even though I'd already kind of like preempted the fact. I was like, look, I don't know if I'm going to come back because I want to relocate back to the Northeast. Like I was really open and honest with them when I walked out and started my maternity leave. They knew that it was highly likely that I wasn't going to return. I couldn't guarantee anything. So I had to keep the door open because we wanted to relocate from Northampton to the Northeast. But in my mind, I don't think I left teaching until 9 months after, like 12 months after I had had my son. So I think in that sense, I think that was quite difficult to process because it was almost like a delay. And then by that point, I was pregnant with my daughter. So, I mean, God, I had no time to think like about how I felt or what impact that would have on me. And I think it was really when my daughter kind of got to her place at nursery, I think it was probably then. So that would be like 5 years after, or yeah, 5 years after I left in 2013 that I really left teaching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but really, really tricky to kind of unpick. So you
Yeah,
felt quite attached
yeah,
to it in a sense that I wasn't doing it, but it was like still this identity, isn't it? Because it comes
of
back
course.
to who we think we are.
And I must have seemed like a right idiot because whenever anybody like made small talk and baby groups, and it was really hard because you'd make a friend, a mum friend at a baby group, and then you'd spend loads of like really intense time, get to know each other, and then they'd go back to work. Then maternity leave would end, and then they go back to work, and then they haven't really got time to like nurture a friendship that actually they've probably only had for 6 months, however intense it was. It was quite lonely. And people would say, "Oh, what do you do? What do you say to that?" Oh, oh, well, I was, and everything's like past tense, even though it hasn't gone. And, I did examining and then, it would, it was just quite tricky. I did tuition, but I did not take it seriously. I was going around to someone's house for 25 quid just so I could like have a bit of pocket money, like so I could buy some mascara and not feel guilty about it. But I think as well, I was fortunate in that it was all planned for. So when we did relocate, we bought the house based on one salary. So there was no pressure for me to go back. When, it was all very, I was in a really fortunate position that it was planned. But I think my exit was probably very, very protracted over 5 years. And it was only really when I discovered your group that I thought, oh, right, yeah, maybe this is my new career. It's taken me a very long time to come to terms with that, I think. So,
There's something there about it just teetering away in the background. Like mine was quite like, bosh, there we go, you're done. And that obviously then leaves you with like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Which is the same as you, but it was just there for a lot longer.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what I
And I
prefer.
think we talked about this off air, didn't we? When we said, actually, I think this is where our stories do come together because primarily the reason why I didn't go back is because I knew that there was a really high chance and probability that I would have a catastrophic exit in the same way that you experienced because I'd seen it happen before, and I knew that actually, rightly or wrongly, if you can't perform at a certain level, then you are going to be put under a lot of pressure. And I just wouldn't have been able to perform in the same way that I could. It's something had to give, really. So I just didn't go back.
There's do you know what? This is slightly off track, but it will, I'm sure.
That's not like us, Richard.
Right. But I was listening to somebody on I listen to footballing podcasts as well, but I was listening to a footballing podcast and like it's no secret, I love playing footy. That's like I forget everything, go kick a ball about, and I love it. And I can't imagine growing up and going, I'm not going to play football anymore. There will always, my dad's nearly 70, still plays football. You know, I'm pretty sure I'll be the same. But I was listening to this podcast the other day and somebody asked this ex-pro, oh, do you still play? And he went, I've not, and he said, not played football since the day I retired. And I'm like, that can't be true. And his reason is like, no, I played at the highest level because I was really good at it. I retired because I couldn't play at that level anymore. I've got no interest in playing at levels below what I was. And in a way, that is similar to what you're saying. You're
Yeah.
going, I was at this level, and no, I want to put a bit of like icing sugar on top. Like you would have been fast tracked into being super headship, right? We've had this discussion before. That was definitely in your pathway, your career pathway. So that's the kind of level that we're talking about. Someone who would be helicoptered in to go and save a school. That would have been what you would have been doing around the country.
Mm.
Go and listen to James' longer podcast because it all becomes clear and apparent in that.
Watch it on times 1.5 though, because it's a bit of a long one. But that is how I felt. I was like, there is absolutely no way I could have gone in as a main scale teacher and survived, because if people weren't doing things in the way that I thought was, not that I would be horrible, but just
No.
I just wouldn't been able to be told what to do if I knew that it wasn't the best way to do it. And I think that that's, or maybe, just having that kind of understanding of the higher levels of school leadership and things. I think I just would have struggled, and it wouldn't have made me happy. I think I would have just struggled to go in and just do the job, I think, and then come out. And you can't do that anyway. And I really have such a strong passion for learning and teaching, and that is really what I'm all about. And I love being with the students, and I love making a difference, but I did really love the leadership side of things. And it was really tough to step away. I just wouldn't have survived, I don't think, if I'd gone back.
The other side of it is also the fact that you've got a young family and that those priorities just change. And it's been a theme on the podcast over the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks where we talk about, well, I've spoken with mums in particular who have then made the change because of having children, and then they've gone back to school. They know their priorities have changed, and suddenly it wasn't what it once was. But they also say that not much had changed
Yeah.
there, but it's changed inside of us. Like it's our change and our perspective. And then we need to take note of that, because if we're not taking note of the way we feel, like I'm not sure look, no one knows the real meaning of life, right? So I don't want to go too deep. Clark, I don't know where we're going, but just bear with me, James. But if we're not taking notice of these feelings that are actually there and should be serving us in one way or another, and we keep them squished down, something's going to happen
Yeah.
at some point. I was chatting to my friend Becky a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying like she started getting really angry. And it was like, she's not an angry person. She'd say, no, I'm not an angry person. But yet I was having arguments with people because this wasn't happening or that wasn't happening. But I think what she says is deep down, it wasn't that was making her angry. It was, oh, actually, I'm not being very good at school. I'm also not
Yeah.
being a very good mum. And I'm kind of like in this weird middle ground of being shit at everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't, nobody wants to do that.
Oh,
When you worked at that level that you're saying about, like when you're at that like, leadership level, or I mean, I talk about a footballer at the elite stage, they don't want to drop down. You don't want it to drop. No one who wants, and let's be honest, like in the main, most people are really good at heart. And what I mean by this is that when you're a parent, you want to be a good parent first and foremost. And I know that's not the case for everybody. There will always be people who aren't in that, it wouldn't put themselves in that bracket, or perhaps they don't realize they're not in that bracket. They don't know any better, but we do. And we want to make sure we're around for our children. We want to make sure that the one area we don't want it to slip is with our own kids and our own children. So I
Yeah, and
think,
I did feel like there was a sense of that, that I felt it was just an inner knowing. I think we talked about this last week, didn't we? Like that gut feeling and just following your gut. I just knew. And I thought this is too tricky to, not listen to, but also the opportunity was there because everything had been put in place to give me the freedom to make the choice. So I was so lucky, so lucky to have that kind of foundation. It wasn't, something that was particularly difficult in terms of like the impact that it would have on the family, like I know is the case for a lot of people. But I think it definitely had an impact on me. It's definitely kind of informed my journey and all of the kind of chats that we've had over the last year and a half, and just understanding how people feel, I think is so important. It's I think tuition has given a lot of women like a real sense of empowerment to take back control, because I think when you're in the school environment and you do feel possibly that you aren't being a very good teacher or you aren't being very good at home, like tuition has the power to give you all of that back, and it's about you taking control of what you want your life to look like again. That's certainly been how I've felt, particularly over the last kind of 2 years. I've seen my tuition journey as almost in two stages, like the 5 6 years where I was just messing about and just thinking, oh well, I'll have to get a job in a classroom, I'll just put off when that's actually going to happen by doing a bit of tuition. And then this second stage of being like, actually, it is a viable kind of future plan. And that's all thanks to you and your group, really. That's made me see that.
well, it's probably a good time to talk about that transition towards helping others, because and this is not my first go at it either. So when I first thought I'd like to build something online, that's something which resonates with the world in its current state and how people are building businesses, and that included tuition at the time as well. There was I don't know, the deeper purposes. I wonder how I can go and help
Mhm.
somebody with something. I didn't really sure what it was. So I lent back into something which I knew, which was parenting, because I'd worked for social services and other and early years projects, delivering something along those lines. But I think you find, when you find your calling, because you can turn up easily, you turn up as yourself. And so I had a kind of go at building a small community around parenting, and you know what, it went okay, but it just didn't feel right.
Right.
It just didn't feel right to me. And I felt like I also ran out of ideas. And I don't know why. I think it just ran out of steam. And often it is, and I know we've spoken about this whole idea that the thing that you're doing now doesn't have to be the thing, right? You can take you different places. And I feel like that's what that was about. And I went to a business event and sat next to somebody, and there were some amazing keynote speakers and whatnot. But I left that day through having conversations with others going, crikey, yeah, teachers. Like, this is the deep passion of mine. Like, I've been through this experience. I think there's something to share here. What I do know is that you can definitely build a tuition business to a good level without even really having much business knowledge. So I wonder if there's others out there. And I actually left that day thinking about, how can I support teachers leave the classroom? But I changed my mind, because I don't want to help teachers leave the
Yeah.
classroom. That's not what I'm about at all. I want to help those who have already decided to leave. People are already thinking about it, because I can't ethically go and grab these people and go, come do
Yeah, yeah.
tuition. It's amazing. Yeah, it is amazing. But also, we do need amazing teachers. So it's those people who have gone through similar experiences. They resonate with the stories that we've been sharing. And that's where the Grow Your Tutoring business group started, because I was like, I can go on and talk about this stuff. And it's been going for about 3 years, the community. And there was a long time where I think any audience growing, I think anybody's trying to grow an audience, just remember that it takes quite a long time, and you have to find the right people. The right people have to find you. You have to be really open to doing different things or do things in a different way. But here we are, and I thank you for your kind words, because there were times when I looked at it and gone, oh, I'm not sure if this is the right thing, even though I kept continuing to turn up. But I did deep down know that there was something here. Just the fact that I was turning up for 18 months and talking to hardly anybody. Like, who would do that? You
Aren't
wouldn't.
we glad that you did? You brought, how many are in the Facebook group now? There's quite a lot of
Over
us.
8,000 now. Yeah, over 8,000. Yeah. And all at different stages. And I think that's the thing with the community, is like looking at who's there and who offers advice and who we've collaborated with, the new people coming in who ask questions. It's a super, super safe
Yeah.
space for people, and long may that continue. And there's a lot of hard work that goes into making it and keeping it that way, that's for sure. But it is worth every single second knowing that people have a place to land and find that support. And that's really, really important.
And it's at whatever level it is as well. I think that's what's so wonderful about the group, that actually, you have the posts in the group where the community kind of help each other out. You've got your 5-day challenges, which are a free way to access like amazing support, and kind of figure out if it's a good fit to work with you as well. So I think you've done an amazing job. And I definitely am so, so glad that I found the group, because um I wouldn't have been able to make the mindset shift, I don't think. I think a lot of pennies dropped for me when I started getting engaged with the community, because I just thought, actually, I don't have to go back to the classroom, and by that point I was maybe 8 years in after I'd left, and I was like, this is a bit sad that I'm just clinging on to the fact of stuff that I used to do.
Mm.
That's not me anymore. And I feel like actually the tuition's given me back who I am. It felt like an out of body experience at the conference, because Miss P came back and I was like, oh God, she's here. She's back. Like this is just like an out of body experience. It was just really strange, but wonderful as well. And you know, it's really important that you give people that opportunity and to like rediscover themselves as well. I think that, that sounds quite dramatic, but I think there'll be so many people listening who resonate with, your story, maybe my story, other stories that are in the community. And it's just a way of normalizing like how you can feel when you do leave, because it isn't really easy. I do feel like teaching as a vocation, you don't really go into it for the money, do you? It's because you want to help people and you have a really strong sense of like public service and, a desire to make a difference. And it isn't an easy decision to leave, whatever reason is behind that. It can be traumatic, and it doesn't have to be a catastrophic exit. There is trauma in everything, in a major life change, for anybody. It doesn't have to be something really dramatic or
I agree. Look, I think what we'll do, let's leave it there, because
we've gone on for ages
we
as usual.
I think we could go on for another hour, and maybe that's what we need to do, is maybe go in a bit deeper into some of these things at some point.
And I'll send you my therapy bill after.
More honestly, I can't afford it. Can't afford it. No. Jane, thank you so much for spending time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Soon.